Hello, and welcome to Coffee and Comics. I'm Todd A.
I am Taylor Trask.
Good morning, Taylor.
Yet again, here we are. We're actually recording on Sunday for once.
I know, back in the morning. That's what I was thinking. This is the show where we talk about coffee and comics. What coffee are you drinking this morning?
Clear. We because it is Sunday morning and I'm in a brand new place to record. I decided to stop by Starbucks and just I got to get some food. A and B. Starbucks isn't my favorite, but if I go there, their tall flat white is probably the best. Like their tall flat white is what a regular craft coffee shop's like normal latte would taste like. So it's kind of like you kind of get a little closer. They charge $1 more, and but it's fine and it's good. If you're gonna have Starbucks, I would recommend that. And I also grabbed one of their like organic turkey egg sandwich things for food. So man, it's lovely. Yeah. How about you?
As you know, because we have had 40 minutes of preview chatter before we hit record, you heard me exclaim off mic when I did not know you had joined the podcast. I got some really nice coffee yesterday, and I'm not going to say the brand, but it was a blend of roasts, and of course I made it last night. If you've listened to this podcast, you know this is like my New Year's resolution is to figure out how to make iced coffee for myself that tastes really good. Not cold brew, but iced. So that means I brew it hot and then I refrigerate it. And my one little hack is that I also make little coffee cubes out of it, put them in the freezer so that it's not too watered down.
I don't think I knew that about you.
Oh, okay. So that's been my my friend Eris suggested that because I was complaining that like mine would be a little too watery. And I wanted it to be sort of richer. And yeah, so I've been doing that for a while. So I was making all this last night, and it was so the roast I got was like a blend of, this particular roaster's, stuff. And I was sort of skeptical, but it smelled pretty good. And as I brewed it, when I got the first pot done, I could tell, I was like, man, this is not as dark. That thing where it's like, it looked like watered down, like Coca-Cola or something.
Yeah. And
I went, I'm not really sure. And so I do my whole thing, I refrigerate one pot and I pour the other in the ice cube tray. And every time I would walk back in my kitchen, I would go, man, it just doesn't smell like coffee I'm going to like. So this has been in my head since last night. And so then you heard me as I poured my first cup and just went, ugh.
Yeah, and for those of you listening, he was listening to a podcast in the background that unrelated to his comment, they had just made a line or something, or they'd said something.
Yeah.
And you're sort of really it timed so perfectly. I was just like, what is his problem with this show?
with a very gross detail from a true crime podcast.
Yeah. So it was. Yeah.
So I poured some milk into it, took another taste, didn't really like it, then put some vanilla syrup in it. And I've determined maybe what I like about coffee is just vanilla milk. So I actually took a few sips and went, that's okay, but there's no coffee taste. It's like,
Todd, they have you covered. You can go to any gas station or grocery store and just pick up like the bottle of cold milk that just happens to have some caffeine in it.
Oh, gross, that's true. Or I could just get Dunkin' Donuts coffee. Boom.
There you go.
Burn on Dunkin' Donuts disgusting coffee. Anyway, the other half of this show is that we talk about comic books.
We do.
Generally, I let you set that up if you'd like to explain that part of the show.
I like to tell people that we are like the kids at the end of Reading Rainbow, where we have a book that we like and we talk about it. We give a little pitch for it. And in fact, I hesitated just then because I'm like, do we do books that we hate? I don't think we have yet. I think it's only books that we personally have thought there was, something interesting or revolutionary, or just the quality of everything we kind of talk about on the show is, I think, up to a certain level for us. And we just want to make sure that you listeners have new stuff to check out when you walk into a comic shop. Because especially these days, a lot of shops, they're they're really well stocked on inventory, and it can kind of be a little overwhelming when you walk in to go, where should I start? Hopefully this podcast is a way for you to, walk in with some insider knowledge and give you a little bit more context. So when you go to pick up a book, you have some things to think about, and you know what you're getting into.
Well, I know that I ask you to explain that every week, but something about so many things that you said just now resonated with me as like things we should share out. Because one is that idea about, do we ever talk about books we hate? Mm-hmm. Which is, you and I have talked about that before, like as a policy sort of thing. Like, is that, what would we do because honestly, reviewing a long form like graphic novel or something every week requires a little prep. And if we get behind and we're reading on Saturday and then we figure out we hate this, what are we going to do on Sunday morning when we're taping, So that would be really intriguing. I mean, we don't really get a lot of like reader tweets and stuff back to us, but I would really like to know if anyone thinks, should we tell you what to avoid? If we really find something, because I think we just in general want to talk about things we're enthusiastic about. But also,
think about it too, that one man's trash is another man's treasure, especially with books. And so like I might find something that I hate, and you might be like, well, that's my new favorite thing. Like, and I don't want to discourage somebody from experiencing that. I mean, some of my favorite stuff I've seen people just rag on, like, oh god. And so I don't want to. I think there's so much good stuff out there. It might, and maybe we do like a special one-off, like, the stuff we hate episode, and we can just crank through like all the books we never talked about. But at the same time, like the books I hate, I really don't want to give any new energy to, It's like you read it and you're like, that was a letdown. Like, you kind of want to just let it die there. You don't want to share it with the world necessarily.
Yeah. I think if either of us took, if we had decided I'm going to read this thick graphic novel this week and we dedicated a lot of time to it and then realized like, oh, I'm not super enthusiastic about it, we would probably talk about it in those terms rather than this sucks. It would be more like, I was really hoping for more, but it's, we would probably play up the positive aspects too.
For those of you who want to hear what it sounds like when we don't like something, go find the American Gods Cast episodes of the Todd and Taylor show, because for one bright, shiny moment, I thought, oh my God, we're going to have a new show called American Gods Cast where we'll watch the show just like Game of Thrones. And we got about 3 episodes in where it's just like,
oh my God, it's in this podcast feed. If you subscribe to Coffee and Comics, just scroll back, because we used to call this show the Todd and Taylor Show, and there's one called American Gods, We Give Up.
Yeah. And it's actually, I re-listened to it recently, and I was like, it's kind of funny just because you can just hear me, you can hear the disappointment but yet anger, and just sort of like, where do we go from here, Todd? Like, it's kind of funny just to see my heart broken that the show didn't turn out what it was like I thought it would.
Yeah, re-listening to that cracked me up so much because I had to work so hard to remember what we'd actually seen on that show. But it was clear, like in the moment, that it was so fresh in my memory, like in that episode where I'm going like, oh God, and then this happens. And but in my present,
What's funny is I had the same feeling. And as I was listening to the episode, I was in my mind thinking, oh, was this episode 8? I'm like, no, this was just episode 3. And oh my God, the show is like, I thought in my mind, I'm like, maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought it was at the time. And hearing myself describe my feelings of episode 3 or I think, was it 3 or 4? I think it was 3.
Actually, I think it was 4, but I think it was our 3rd episode, because our big tip off should have been, we had this thought that we would do an American Gods cast every week.
Yeah.
And I had not read the books. It was going to reverse our Game of Thrones podcast where you were a book reader and I wasn't. And then I was going to read the book at the end of the season. It was going to be this big, like, planned out thing. And then in the second week, we skipped the podcast. And our second episode is episodes 2 and 3 of the show. That should have been like the tip off. Like, we got out of number 2 and went, oh, there's not a lot to talk about there.
And then just hearing myself recount, like, oh, that's right, they don't make it to House on the Rock. Oh, that's right, the technical kid shows up at this weird, like, just so many things that just weren't. Yeah. Maybe we should. What we should do is resurrect American Gods Cast, but from a totally critical point of view, where it's like every episode, like we lay down the hammer and like challenge Neil Gaiman to like produce, because Neil Gaiman's the showrunner now. So season 2 could conceivably be a lot better, a lot worse, more of the same. We don't know. More on that to come, Todd.
I got a good segue, which is the other thing you said in that intro to our show theme is about us being like the curators of telling you like what we like. And so if you go into that comic shop and have that overwhelming experience, and you're sort of like, I want to check out something new, we're here to like provide those suggestions, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But and the way this is a segue is that I would say also talk to your friendly neighborhood comic shop clerk, because they are excellent curators.
Yes.
And my pick to you comes courtesy of my comic shop clerks.
Ooh, good segue.
Who they host a book club, and I had asked a couple of weeks ago, what's the book club this week? And it turned out it was actually that week I was going to be in Denver, so I couldn't go to the book club. But they said, oh, it's Betty and Veronica, because all the Archie comics have been rebooted now. So it's the Betty and Veronica collection. And I kind of went, meh. And then she said, by Adam Hughes. And I went, what? So I know Adam Hughes because there was this great run of Catwoman comics in the 2000s, I guess. It started with Darwin Cook when they sort of rebooted the Catwoman like thing, and Darwin Cook was doing the art where he's very distinctly different from Adam Hughes. But then Adam Hughes started doing the covers for this particular run, and it went really long, and produced like super iconic Catwoman covers. So that went from like, I have a giant art collection book of his, and I've gotten a bunch of sketchbooks of his, like signed at Comic Cons, and I just I love his work. And could not believe that he was involved in one of these Archie comics. I just haven't been following. I sort of had this misperception of what they were doing with the Archie comics. I had gone to I'd gone to pick up one specifically because there was a variant cover where they had done like Josie and the Pussycats or somebody. They'd done the cover of the issue was like a nod to a Ramones album cover. And I thought like, oh, that'll be a good like collector's piece. That's kind of up my alley. And then I think there was one where like Tegan and Sarah were in Josie and the Pussycats or something like that.
Oh, that's kind of perfect.
but mostly I was tuned out. Like it never occurred to me to think about the story. Adam Hughes wrote this story and illustrated it. And he's just one of those distinctive, old school, like, I don't even know if old school makes sense, but he's just a very distinctive artist. And, his style it's like definitely in the realm of the big two kind of superhero styles, but it's also set apart, I would almost put it in, like he's one of those guys that I would put with like, when Dustin Nguyen does covers that are like, it's a Batgirl, but he's watercolored it or something.
Okay.
Or, in Kingdom Come, who's the artist? I keep wanting to say it's Mark Waid, but that's the author. It's Alex Ross.
There you go.
So, how he's totally set it apart. Like, it's like sort of this, Adam Hughes is not that grandiose, like, Greek ideal of superheroes art, but he's in that school of like he sits apart from them, I think. And I believe I've been on this quest for a long time. Oh, it was at okay, the big story went to in Colorado with all the huge like long boxes. Was that Time Warp?
Yes.
We went to this comic shop, you and I, called Time Warp
in Boulder.
And I had been on this hunt for years for like my friend who is also named Todd. He and I had talked about Adam Hughes a long time ago because he had said, I had told him about, liking this artist. And he was like, oh yeah, I loved his stuff on like Justice League. And I went, what? When was he doing Justice League? And Todd told me about this whole run of like, it was either Justice League or that one that's like sort of, I don't know. There was another DC comic that was sort of a parody of Justice League that I can't come up with right now. But I had looked at, my local comic book shop, and I'd looked at Comic Cons for this, and I just couldn't find any of these issues. And that guy whose name also escapes my memory at Time Warp, I mentioned it to him and he took me right to the aisle.
Nice.
And was like, okay, let's think. This was probably 94 or something like that. And then just chunk, he's right in it and, pulls out a whole bunch of the samples. Great. So yeah, I went into this with not knowing what to expect, like clearly feeling like I've misperceived what the Archie reboot is about, and I've misperceived what Adam Hughes can do, like to tell a story. And it is, and honestly, for the first few pages, even though I loved the art, I was thinking we're gonna if I don't read another book, this might be the first episode where I have to say, like, I don't know what to think about this book. I might have skewed negative on it.
Oh wow!
But it wrapped up in basically once I gave myself over to it, to the sort of, I was a little resistant of maybe it's too corny for me or something. Once I gave into that, it was great. It is not corny in like a Jughead and Archie way. Hughes basically takes the characters, it's like they have the names and they have the personalities, like, broad stroke personality sort of traits of the Archie comics. But it reads like a Dawson's Creek episode or something like that, or maybe even like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of thing, where, aware of its own place in the culture. And just more, even though these teens are quippier and wittier than, any teens in the world, it just feels like, okay, we're just telling like a teen drama. Yeah. It's not, it's like more Mean Girls than it is like that cartoonish than like Scooby-Doo or something. It's, so, and especially with Hughes' style, which is just more grown up than that like goofy Archie comics style. And I know they're doing stuff like Riverdale, and they're just taking these characters and putting them in the current style of things. And I just think that sort of suits. So the first thing that sort of caught me off guard was this is narrated by a dog. And I forgot, I closed the page up, but the dog, of course, he is a J. Farnsworth Wigglebottom III. But due to what his humans have named him, you can call him Hot Dog. Okay. So I kind of assume Hot Dog was probably Jughead's dog or something. Yeah. But Hughes has immediately taken it and turned him into this sort of omniscient narrator, that appears from time to time, like, oh, ladies and gents, don't we find ourselves in a pickle here? I, J. Farnsworth Wigglebottom III, will help us navigate these, difficult waters in our next exciting episode of. So it's kind of that thing. Like he's the, opener and fills in some key details from time to time, but it's mostly just a device to let you, the reader, know of the tone of the book. Got it. Okay. And then Hughes does some cool things, like where he'll sort of, he's winking like with the audience. He's winking at you, but it's like we're in on it together. And there's a gag in the middle where he totally breaks the fourth wall and says, I think I'm probably sure the dog. Oh yeah, the dog does say it. He says, I gotta inform you now. Pages 19 and 20 of this book don't exist because I ate them. So I'm just going to have Betty and Veronica do an exposition drop here to catch you up to what you missed. And you know what? I'll just draw them in swimsuits, since that's probably what you came here for. That's awesome. So then you flip to the next page and it's totally white, but it's Betty and Veronica in swimsuits, sort of lying on the ground like you would like when you're a kid reading comic books. And then it's just tons of bubbles between them of like telling the whole story of like what, supposedly was lost. Okay. And so, there's great little wall breaking stuff like that. And Hughes is also, I don't know where to place him on the cheesecake scale. I would say he's probably known for some cheesecake, but a little bit restrained in it. And I definitely felt like honestly, when I read that thing, like, oh, they're going to be in swimsuits, I went, oh no, that's really going to break the tone of this piece if all of a sudden it's like super cheesecakey, because then then it's like it's for a certain audience that I wouldn't have thought had been along for the ride at that point. But he did, as far as I can judge from my eye, I would not say that page is cheesecakey. It's done in a way that they are not hopefully being exploited in the images of Betty and Veronica, but it's also probably a nod to like Adam Hughes and his own art of saying like, that's what you would expect me to do, is draw them in swimsuits. So here they are, but it's, not as graphic as some of his sketchbooks I might have. So anyway, but the whole story proceeds along this like Dawson's Creek kind of Mean Girls 90210 sort of high school thing. There's a big dance coming up, and they've got to turn it into a fundraiser to save Pops, which I'm pretty sure that like Ian Ziering had to save the Peach Pit at some point. And, it's like all built up along those tropes of like, how's this going to go? And when it wraps up, it's like, you could have, seen this ending coming from the beginning, like first pages, but it's been done in such a clever way. Like a lot of the jokes kind of work to distract you from thinking of the like overall trope of the story.
Okay.
Like he's kind of peppered in enough like banter between Archie and Jughead or Betty and Jughead or something like that, that you're aware of the things happening in the background, but you're not focused too much on like, oh, we've seen this before. So it wraps up in a, satisfying conclusion that yes, you've probably seen before, you could have anticipated in some way, but I just thought like the way it got there was great. And I really love the friendship he draws between these people. And also, I got to add, I think this book passes the Bechdel test.
Whoa! Oh my God.
Because it is not about Betty and Veronica, fighting over a man or being all smitten with, one of the gang. Everyone in it is like, there are these just, I want to say platonic, but I almost feel like Archie and Jughead are the couple in this. It is not a platonic relationship. I mean, that is not the text, but the sort of, and it's not necessarily the way you're supposed to read it, like subtext wise either. It's just that, yeah, Archie and Jughead, their conversations are with each other.
For those of you who don't know what the Bechdel test is, it applies to all fiction, so movies, books, TV shows.
Yeah.
But it basically asks the question: do at least two women talk to each other about something else other than a man?
Right.
And if yes, then you pass it. If the answer is yes, then you pass the Bechdel test. But if not, if so many things involve the woman or the women characters at least having some kind of agency, based on the man, or somebody's romantically obsessed with the man, or the man has to solve their problem for them. So which is fascinating because I would think the two stories where that would be the most difficult in comics would be Scooby-Doo and Archie.
Yep.
Because Scooby-Doo's got kind of equally weighted male, female characters. Archie, the same thing. And traditionally their female characters have been, sort of at the not disposal of, but at the sort of whim of the male characters. The male characters are the ones that drive the story. So it's kind of great to hear that that's not the case here.
Yeah, it's, it is largely about Betty and Veronica's friendship and some things that go wrong in that friendship. Mm-hmm. And in the background or for like wandering through it are Archie and Jughead and their friendship and just the way they complete each other's sentences and joke with each other. I mean, it's clear that like, I'm not saying it's like necessarily sexual, but it's like the affection is between Archie and Jughead and between Betty and Veronica. That's what we're focused on. It's not about the girls fighting over the guys or something like that. And even I think her name is Midge and Moose, who are like those sort of side characters, like the big jock and then his girlfriend. They're just affectionate with each other. It's also not like this is not like a romantic battle for affections kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's also not just a bunch, besides Midge and Moose, it's not about boys and girls being coupled up. Yeah. That was really cool. Like it never just turned into something like that, which would have definitely hit the sort of cheese and the corniness factor. If it all turned out to be this elaborate romantic plot, I really would have groaned,
Yeah.
Me too. And I'll tell you, like, so I really enjoyed it. And then on top of that, this thing has like, I mean, this is the trade paperback. It's not like a hardcover special edition or anything. And there are probably, I don't know, 10 pages of variant covers from
Whoa.
different artists.
Damn.
And then there's a whole, at the very end, there's an Archie Jughead story that is illustrated in the style of Speed Racer. And that I did not care for. So I'm not even going to review that. But
I think you and I might have a similar distaste for Speed Racer, much to the chagrin of fellow comics fans. I can't.
Well, except for that movie, which was genius.
Was it? I never even bothered to pick it up. I mean, I like the Wachowskis, but I was like, I just can't. I don't care about that character at all. Like at all. I could care less.
Yeah, when you give a character just the name, like when you're just like hero pilot. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
What do I care? Who cares? And then they try to turn it into his first name. Oh, we all call him Speed. No,
you did a great thing today, Speed. We can't.
Anyway, I get the meta commentary there of like that story, but yeah, I mean, I read like 3 pages of it and went, I don't care. It's not Adam Hughes art, and it's not in that tone of the big story of the book. But that cover gallery is so awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, and again, I just had it open and then flipped it closed, but it had a bunch of our favorites in it. I think Ramon Perez was in there, ooh. And and I mean, if you have not already Googled some of the art from this, I just think you'd love it. It's at times like a Norman Rockwell sort of painting style, but just very cool. There's a Cliff Chang cover. That's the Sex Criminals artist, isn't it? I believe.
I don't remember.
And then. Flipping through. Chip Zdarsky. That's the Sex Criminals artist. What's Cliff Chang on? Crap. Listeners will correct me. Yeah, and a Ramon Perez, and just awesome stuff.
Cliff Chang is Paper Girls.
That's right. Oh my God. I'm sorry. I get all my Image titles. I was like, he's not on Saga. What is he on?
He's also done a lot of Wonder Womans in 2012 and 2017. So.
Thank you for looking that up. But that's, so I would wrap it up there. I mean, it's I definitely worth my time. I'm so glad that I listened to the recommendation of my, comic shop clerks.
Once again, just say the title and the author for our listeners.
Yeah, it is Betty and Veronica by Adam Hughes.
Excellent. Well, I have a bit of a blast from the past as well. It's a book that it's one of those that I've sort of been sitting on. I'm like, when I need just kind of a go-to pick, I'm going to use this one. And it's something that I read. Long story short, I got back into comics in a big bad way around 2014. And there were a few things that drove that. One was Watchmen, as we've discussed ad nauseum. Another was Injustice: Gods Among Us, which was a game first, but then they did this excellent run of single issues and then ultimately collected volumes and stuff for Injustice, which I'll probably get to on a future episode. But the third thing, and this might be more relevant, is DC's run of Masters of the Universe comics. And I sort of got sucked into it. I was in a Barnes & Noble, and they had a trade paperback for kind of volume 1 of this, and it was really subversive. Like, it starts off where Skeletor basically wins, and everybody's in sort of this weird mind trance. I'm like, what's this? And it was really well done. And so I started reading it, single issues as they came out, and the whole thing accumulated in a arc called Eternity War. And if you're thinking that's awfully similar to another war that just happened recently in another universe, it's because Eternia is the planet on which Masters of the Universe exists, and the Eternity War was sort of the final, and I mean final confrontation that would have either destroyed the entire universe or not. And I'm going to focus mainly on that arc. There are 2 volumes, 2 trades in the Eternity War arc. And I read them all as single issues. I think there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 15. There are 15 single issues that make up the entire Eternity War arc. So I'm going to include all of them. And there's a lot of really good story here. There's a lot of sub stories to kind of get you set up. Before I forget too, the writing is by Dan Abnett, and most of the art is by Pop Man. And Dan Abnett has written, published by DC as well. DC's been putting these out. Dan Abnett has written a lot of different things. He's written some Thanos books, some Titans books. He did a thing for Warhammer. He's written some like novels and things too. So he's kind of been out there in and around comics. Pop Man has drawn everything from a lot of the Flash stories to some Injustice stories. And then he's mainly been the main artist on all of these He-Man or Masters of the Universe releases. He did not do, I don't believe he did I thought it was terrible, but there was this He-Man and the Thundercats mashup that happened, ended last year that I just hated. And I don't think it was not his art. He may have been a consultant, but Pop Man does all the drawing on most of these books. And I think they've got some guest people here and there, but those are the kind of the main two guys. To get you up to the arc, and I'm going to spoil just a little bit because the previous arc to this is all about Adora, He-Man's twin sister, or Prince Adam's twin sister. And that entire arc is about She-Ra coming into existence or come in and what that looks like. But they took a really freaking cool twist with it. Largely that she is sort of the adopted daughter of Hordak. And that's true. And because Todd, I know you're not a Masters of the Universe fan. Basically, He-Man's the main good guy. Skeletor is the main bad guy. In the original cartoon, they introduced later on, He-Man has his twin sister in an alternate dimension named Adora. She was kidnapped when she was a baby, and she was taken there by Hordak. Hordak is that dimension sort of version of Skeletor. Kind of an all-powerful sorcerer, sort of overlord kind of character. Well, in this comics run, Hordak is way, way worse than that. He's kind of immortal. He's been around for forever. He was defeated by He-Man's ancestor way back in the day. So his spirit or his soul has sort of been kept in this almost like tomb where he can communicate and affect things, but he's not physically there. And so he sends Adora over to to Eternia to basically lead his horde army and conquer Eternia. That entire arc is about her doing that, and she's evil at first, and then she slowly discovers her past and slowly becomes She-Ra. And I will say this: the moment that happens is I almost teared up because it was so damn powerful and just amazing. So Eternity War starts at the end of that. She-Ra has just come into kind of being. Hordak has just figured out a way to emerge from this sort of cocoon he's been in, and he's in physical body now. And he comes to Eternia, and he basically takes Castle Grayskull. Castle Grayskull in the mythology of the series is where He-Man gets his power. It's the ancestral home of King Grayskull, who's Adam's or He-Man's like long lost relative. King Grayskull is the one who set up the Sword of Power and all these things, built Castle Grayskull. So throughout all mediums, the cartoon, the toy line, these comics, Skeletor and Hordak are always trying to get Castle Grayskull because there's some secret there, some secret power that'll let them do crazy things, take over the universe, whatever you name it. Well, Eternity War finally lets us see what happens when Hordak or Skeletor take over. So Hordak takes Castle Grayskull, and the whole thing kicks off when he basically transforms Castle Grayskull into like his lair. And so the team for the first time ever is without Castle Grayskull. They're without a lot of things, and they have got to fight Hordak because he's about to win. And the entire arc takes you through that. There are some really crazy twists and turns that they had hinted at in previous cartoons or previous comics, but never either had the balls to do, or they thought the audience was not advanced enough. Which I love because it's like this was written for kids who were around at the time who thought this could be so much more. Like the mythology could be so much, mined so much better. They're finally doing it. So it's like you can tell these people were like, they thought exactly the same thing I thought when I was a kid watching this, or later on when like they revived the cartoon for, I think in the early 2000s there was this really good cartoon on Cartoon Network that they revived the toy line. I loved it. It ran for about 3 years and it kind of stopped. And I think if they had done it today, it might have been more popular. But that said, the sub stories that they tell are amazing. There's one with Teela that is unbelievably good. If you know who Teela is, she's Man-at-Arm's daughter. She's also the daughter of the sorceress. She has this sort of destiny that they've always hinted at. Maybe she'll become the sorceress one day. Maybe something bad will happen. They show you that, like they take you through that. There's a whole thing where Skeletor, who had been sort of defeated in a previous arc, he comes back, and what he does is unbelievable. The whole thing ends in this they wipe the board completely clean, and it ends in a really freaking satisfying way, but it ends in a way that they could keep this comic going now for another 20 years and it would be totally fresh stories. Like they've exhausted, I think, kind of all the old bits and pieces of the old mythology and really gave you a satisfying conclusion. And they found a way too, by the way, to tie this into every other medium of He-Man. There's a scene where Skeletor, after he's come back, he assumes a little bit more power, but he talks about when he was away, he was able to travel through the dimensional nexus and see every incarnation of Skeletor that's always existed, whether it be the toy line or the old cartoon or the old comic or the movie with Frank Langella. Like they show it all, and he's like, and in every version of reality, I lose. And so in this comics version, he was trying to avoid that. And so it's just really cool. Like they honor every part. It's not like the comics version is like the only version that exists. Like they absolutely acknowledge and honor all the previous versions of He-Man that have ever existed in a really cool way. Like they treat it so well. And so as a He-Man fan, it was really cool to see like this thing that I was into. And it's worth noting, I've mentioned on a few episodes, I love Marvel, I love DC, I love these movies that come out, but I've never had that feeling that I think maybe you, Todd, have had, or I know like Kevin Smith and like those kinds of people have, they've said, I never thought in my lifetime I would see, Guardians of the Galaxy on screen, or when I saw Thanos on the screen for the first time, I cried because I'd always wanted it, I never knew we'd get it. And I appreciate that, but that's never been me because I was never a comics fan of the big two as a kid. That was later in life. If they ever put He-Man on screen, I will have that reaction. Like if they ever do a really good He-Man movie, that Dolph Lundgren one was standing, like
that's what I was say.
Well, Frank Langella in that movie is the best Skeletor we'll ever get. So I'll just say that right now. But like, if they were to put a new He-Man movie up that was good today, I would probably tear up immediately after seeing the first trailer because I want these characters mean a lot, as much to me as the DC Marvel characters mean to other folks who were around in the 70s and 80s. I think this comic is the next close step to that because this comic treats these characters with respect, but also it acknowledges some of the more ridiculous aspects. Like there are characters that were created purely for toys, like Fisto. He's a guy whose fist is big and can like punch through walls, and his name is Fisto. Or there's like a bee character, like an evil bee character called Buzz Off. So like in the comic, they'll actually acknowledge how ridiculous some of these names are and everything. And they really weave together all these different pieces in a way that makes it legitimate, makes it cohesive, makes it, there's some tongue-in-cheek stuff, but it makes you feel like, God, these guys care. This wasn't just a like slough off thing for DC to make some money. They actually like Abbott really freaking Abnett, really freaking cares about these characters. So it's really satisfying to see that. And again, I could spoil a lot along the way. I really don't want to. It's as interesting as Game of Thrones because there are twists and turns and different factions trying to, take over Castle Grayskull. Just because Hordak has it or succeeds in taking it does not mean he's going to hold it. There's backstabbings and twists and turns and like allegiances change and, people are corrupted and then brought back. It's amazing. It is unbelievably amazing. I will tease one thing. At some point, there is a sort of dark flash forward that Adam has that shows what happens if He-Man were to win, what would occur. And there's like a whole issue that plays out. And you realize if He-Man wins in the way we want him to, it's going to be bad. And it shows why that is. So it kind of takes that off the table. So you're like, crap, how the hell are they going to pull this off? How is there going to be a resolution to this that works? And that keeps you guessing kind of right up until the very end. It was spectacular. I can't say enough about it. And I'm even more excited if they pick this back up again. They leave that last issue with so many like things in place. Like you realize a certain character may not be dead who you thought was dead. Castle Grayskull is different, very, very different. And like, what He-Man is as a character is very different than what you think he should be. It just ends in a really cool place they could just keep this going. So I hope they do.
So when did this run?
This particular arc ran from 2014 to 2016, and it was monthly. So it took them, to get 15 weeks out, took them a little while. There was one or two crossover events. If you're a big DC fan, there was there was a He-Man Superman crossover where He-Man and some of the characters get pulled into the DC universe, like on Earth. And it's strangely has something to do with Prince Adam's mom. She's from Earth, and then so like she's there, so he gets sucked in, and then you realize that. I'm just gonna say this is kind of a spoiler, but if you're interested, like this, if you're a He-Man fan, this is gonna make you go, "What?" Orko is a villain at some point in this. Orko becomes a big bad, and if you're thinking like Orko, like the little goofy magical magician character, yes, Orko becomes a villain in this story, and especially in that crossover event. So if that is interesting to you, go pick this up. I would recommend it's tricky to talk about this arc because this arc is kind of like everything you ever wanted, but you really kind of want to go back and see how we get there. You can definitely start reading the Eternity War arc at the beginning at issue. Oh, what is it? It's issue. No, I think they just start over the numbering. So it's Eternity War number 1 and it ends with Eternity War number 15. I forget in the run of like the Masters of the Universe DC run, I think it's probably issue maybe 29 or 30 where it starts, or maybe later, but it's Eternity War issue 1 is the beginning of it. But you can start there. I would go back though. I'd go back and read some of the earlier ones too, either after you finish the arc or before you start, because it's all really fulfilling. But I mean, somebody like you remind me, you were a little too old to be a Masters of the Universe or He-Man kid in the 80s, right?
Yeah. Just by a little. It was like one of those weird things too, where a lot of fandoms as a kid, even though I was probably in the right age, my brother and I sort of divided them up, like he was into He-Man, so I wasn't,
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. I was into whatever, one of us got Transformers, the other got GoBots.
Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So if you're not into He-Man, like, definitely, like, just the mythology of it is, and if you're a Game of Thrones fan, like, you'll dig this. If you're a He-Man fan, it's going to mean way more to you because there are little winks and nods to things that, like I said, like that you wanted as a kid or that you saw in the cartoon. You're like, oh, I wish they'd go through this door and show us what's back here. You're like, they do that in this run. So there's a lot going on.
Is the Eternity War arc collected in a trade paperback or a hardcover edition?
Yeah, there's 2. There's volume 1 and volume 2. I don't think they've done a hardcover yet. I've been keeping an eye out for like a really good omnibus of either Eternity War or some of these like newer He-Man run issues. Maybe they've done it. I haven't seen it yet. I would love that because I'd love to see some DVD extras and stuff in there too. One thing I will note: if you end up getting the single issues, the covers typically have nothing to do with the issue, or the covers hint at something that's still a long ways away. Right. Which was a little confusing because they'd show you, when you finish the issue, they would give you a teaser for the next month's issue. So they'd usually give you either the cover art, the title, or like a little like preview with the cover art, like, yeah, here's what you can expect. And you'd see the cover going, oh my God, this is going to happen. And then it doesn't. It's more of just a concept. Once in a while, you'll see something that lines up pretty well. So
what is the art like? I mean, how would you describe that for some? Is it like the cartoon, or is it more like superhero art? Oh no, it's very superhero-y. It does not look like the cartoon at all. It's epic. It's just really. I'm trying to pull up a page or two here. If you like Injustice, if you've read those books, because he's oh my God, I just forgot his name. The artist has worked on a lot of those too. But yeah, it's traditional paneling, traditional speech bubbles. Coloring is, exactly what you'd expect from a Superman or a Marvel book. But because it is DC, it probably feels more like a DC book than anything. It's got some of that aesthetic that you'd expect. But I'm definitely into it. One of the reasons I hate the He-Man Thundercats crossover so much is because the art is so just bubbly and weird and not. I was so used to this really good kind of just streamlined art from these Eternity War books. By the time they announced that crossover, I was just like, I can't get into this. It's not even, and that crossover is not even based on the same timeline. It's almost like its own separate, complete pocket story that is completely separate from this. That was really disappointing. So does He-Man have his like Dutch boy haircut? No. They make it a point to try to make these
make a lot of the stuff that was ridiculous look real, like look realistic in this. Whether it be his haircut, the sword, looks good. The way Skeletor is presented looks good. This it looks like a comic, but it's completely appropriate for what it is as a comic. Like the colors, like the one thing about He-Man that I always liked was that every character is very colorful, right? Like Trapjaw, Trapjaw is purple, blue, green, red. Skeletor is purple and blue. Like Hordak is red and black. Like there's just all these characters just pop so much as toys, as cartoons, and especially as comics. Like it just makes a lot of sense. One thing I'll mention, kind of I should have mentioned this in the beginning. One of the very first comic books or graphic novels I ever purchased was when I was 7 or 8. The movie had just come out, the Dolph Lundgren movie, and the bookstore, I think it was Walden Books, had kind of just a run of He-Man comics. And there was this one that I grabbed that was fairly short. It was meant for kids, but it was kind of advanced. It was He-Man in a story that they could only tell in comics at the time. Because it just would have been way too expensive to do as a cartoon. And I've kept that this entire time. So when I really got back into comics again, that was one of the first things I pulled out of my childhood library and put on my comic shelf, because I'm like, man, this still holds up. And so it was really cool to see that and then jump into this because it kind of felt like a nice little continuation of that sort of style and aesthetic of He-Man story.
Yeah, and it looks like they put pants on He-Man.
Yeah. The Gone is the little barbarian underwear. Then they take He-Man actually goes through a couple of different transformations. Like as he kind of finds new conduits of power, or he learns some new thing or some new secret, his sword will change or his costume will change or something to that effect. So it's good, but man, I tell you, like there's the mythology in this. I've said that a few times, but it's true. They play it up so nicely. You feel like they just really honor the source material and they add on to it with a lot of adult, sort of themes and ideas that I wouldn't necessarily, as a little kid, it would have been almost too much for me. It's definitely meant for people who are in their 20s and 30s now or older, but who, were kids at the time who want this to be treated with, seriousness and respect, but also a little fun.
Well, it's interesting, and it's great that, like, again, we don't know what the other of us has picked for the book to discuss. So it does kind of go hand in hand with that Betty and Veronica thing. And although that's not the Archie family is not something I grew up with, there is that aspect of this book where it's like Adam Hughes telling a story to people around my age. Like sort of like that. I think kind of, that can forgive a lot of the cheesiness or the corniness of resurrecting one of these old intellectual properties, and it makes me think of like, what would, like, I can almost see now, again, I wasn't like a huge fan of this, but I can see a telling of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah. That would be like that. Like, let's like turn that into something interesting, but you would have to talk to the audience that grew up with it. So you'd have to be, it would have to be addressed to an older audience. And I think what was, and I didn't see them, but I think what was off about those Michael Bay movies was they were trying to resurrect it for kids, and maybe make it more violent or something. But it's like, but it's still like cheesy. And, and that's kind of what happened with the Transformers movies was you're not hitting the right audience with this. And those older people are going to it and they're upset because it's not for them, So
I would say though, that first Transformers movie I really liked because I think that was as close as we're ever going to get to the transfer. Like the cars made sense, even though Shia LaBeouf was in it. Like he made sense in it. Like this, it kind of everything about it made sense. Like Megatron's been sort of frozen in stasis. And he turns into a plane. He doesn't turn into a gun, but he turns into a plane, and he has like a gun sort of ability. And the soundtrack was cool. It just seems like that they could have just stopped right there, and then everything since then has just been ever more ridiculous. Where now it's like you got Optimus Prime riding a giant dinosaur dragon robot inexplicably, like brandishing some giant sword and Mark Wahlberg's running around for. I don't get how those movies can still be made. I just don't. But to your point about Ninja Turtles, that's a tricky one. That started off as a graphic, as a comic, and as actually kind of
Yeah, and it was sort of told to an audience that got the joke of how absurd it was. It wasn't told to kids.
No, exactly. Yeah, and then like the kid angle. I mean, I was one of them. Like when that cartoon came out, I was like, "Oh my god, this is great!" But I don't think I could have gotten into the Turtle comics at the time. So now it's the trick with the Turtles is that there are so many different comics that have been. I mean, like everything from the original run to their crossover where they join up with Batman to some of these like they kind of delved into like once they go into space, it gets really crazy and it's really hard to keep track of. Like for me, the Turtles were at their best when it was Shredder was the main antagonist and they were carefully like trying to find like he was trying to create new mutants to battle against them, and that's when you get some of your crazy like your other characters. But like once they get into space and there's like time traveling dinosaurs and shit, like I just can't follow them down that road. But you're right, maybe there's a version of this. Although you know what, that first Ninja Turtles movie. It's interesting. Think about the first Transformers movie and think about the first Ninja Turtles movie. That first Ninja Turtles movie was like as earnest and as grim as I think we'll ever see. Like that thing was, I even think back now, like it at the time, they could have gone really hokey and cartoony. And they made that thing as grounded as they possibly could. Yeah, it was a Jim Henson Muppet head, but the color palette was dark.
I thought you meant the first Michael Bay movie. You mean
no. Sorry, the first Ninja Turtles movie. Yeah. And it's like, and that first Ninja Turtles movie of when they rebooted it a couple years ago was the complete opposite. Like Michael Bay produced that one, and that one was just like, as much as I love Tony Shalhoub, he doesn't need to be voicing Splinter. It's just like, that just didn't. None of that made any damn sense. So it's like you compare those two movies. It's almost like that original 1988-89 Turtles movie was like it was what Christopher Nolan's Batman movies were. It's like we're going to make this feel serious and grounded and like, Krang wasn't running around trying to bring his spaceship into like Shredder was like a guy from Japan who started a underground criminal network in New York, largely based on kids, on teenagers. And you're like, that makes sense. Like I'm in. But like that's something that Christian Bale's Batman would have. That's an aesthetic that would have fit in really well with that movie. I don't know why I got off on that tangent, but that's. I just feel like I think with He-Man, the trick is and I know they've been talking about a He-Man movie for forever. The trick is going to be they can't treat it too seriously. They've got to make it look killer, right? So they can't if they can do as much practical effects as possible. I think that would be the key. But they have to acknowledge that these characters were built based on toys or stories and characters that were meant to just sell toys. And a lot of them were cranked out like 3 a week, so.
I mean, one of the great things that Guardians of the Galaxy gave us was a template for that kind of movie.
Bingo. Yes.
Like Rocket is a ridiculous character. Groot is a ridiculous character, but they really put it in a context that made sense. So I if they could take it that way, that might work.
I'm sad that I don't see a world where James Gunn does He-Man, but God damn it. if there's somebody who's ideal for it. Like, can you imagine if Guardians didn't happen and instead he did He-Man in a similar sort of tone, like that would be the franchise we'd be talking about right now. Like Marvel would still be doing its thing, but like to just see He-Man kind of take that mantle. Now it's even easier. Like Thor Ragnarok exists, right?
Yeah, good point.
We're in a world where that happened and was the most popular Thor movie of all. So it's like, I worry that whoever does He-Man is going to try to make it too. They're just going to miss the tone. They're going to miss you keep it serious. Like Skeletor is a badass character. You make him, you ground him in some sort of delusions of grandeur so that he makes sense. But like when you introduce a character called Stinkor, who is like literally a skunk man, and like that's his like that can't be serious. Maybe it's one of those things like with Deadpool, like where he has like how the X-Force is assembled and quickly they all die. Maybe it's one of those things where it's like, Skeletor brings forth like this, all the tier 2 or tier 3 like characters, and they all just die immediately. Something like that could be really fun.
That's a really good point too. They could do a He-Man movie like a Deadpool movie. Like if you could pull that off in a PG rating or something, that would be pretty funny. Like making fun of itself as He-Man or, because Cable was a pretty serious character, I like you could do that with Skeletor.
You could, but the thing about He-Man is like He-Man's not like Thor, right? He is in the physicality and like, how he wields like a weapon that's kind of like the ultimate weapon. But what He-Man is like, remember, He-Man is at his heart is Prince Adam, this smug sort of, like self-absorbed kid, is like, 17, 18-year-old kid who's next in line for the throne, who has lived his entire life in relative peace. Suddenly Skeletor emerges onto the scene, and it's the first time that Eternia has been threatened in this way for a long time. And Prince Adam has to, he finds the sword that when he shouts out by the power of Grayskull, he gets all the power he needs to fight off this evil. Yet he still has the maturity and the, courage of a 17-year-old kid. So like, what does that look like when he has to, he has to have this dual identity. So it's kind of like Superman. He's got to like learn to, he's got to grow and learn and take on the responsibility and learn about who he is as a man when he's He-Man. So kind of like Shazam, or kind of like, Batman Year One, even to some extent. And he's got like this kind of like host of characters that are all like based on fantasy or technology, in a really kind of cool hybridized way. So it's like, it is sci-fi fantasy, and it's, so anything is possible except for time travel. Well, eventually, anything possible. So it's like there's this element, like I want to see like this hero's journey of this kid, like this Luke Skywalker kid who becomes this kind of character. But then there's like, in the comics, especially in this run of comics, like Teela is like the Tony Stark of the whole thing. She's constantly giving him shit. She's, in the original cartoon, she was more like, timid, and she was kind of a warrior woman, but she was very much timid and very kind of much relegated to the female sort of Mary Sue kind of like, she's off to the side. In this, she's very capable. She's there. They always kind of flirt with that romantic thing between her and Adam, but she's such a tomboy. She's such a like just no bullshit, just no nonsense, trying to prove her way character. That's where some of that Deadpool humor could come from. Like if you throw Orko in, like there could be there are characters where that would be more than appropriate, but I don't want the whole thing to be a comedy. Like I want it to be, I think Thor is the right balance of comedic elements and sort of the mythological, like the way they did Hela. Yeah. Like you can't watch Thor Ragnarok and watch what Cate Blanchett did with Hela and not think that could easily be Evelyn from He-Man. Like that was basically Evelyn as a character. Like that's what that character was. Right. So it's like, you could totally do it. And they're gonna do it. I mean, we're not gonna like, you and I are not gonna see the end of this life before we see another He-Man movie. I shudder at what it could be compared, in a negative sense compared to what it could be if they really thought about these things. If you give it to Taika Waititi, we're good to go.
I hear what you're saying. You're saying put Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in a Dutch boy wig and print it. Well, there's, I mean. Sorry, I'm derailing us again. We should wrap this up.
As soon as you said that, I'm like, that's the obvious comedic SNL choice. But like, think about what they did with Chris Evans and Captain America, right? Like they had to CGI him as like the weakling little kid. Yeah. But like once, and I think they CGI'd him a little bit too when he was buff, especially when he comes out of the machine for the first time. Like when he's shirtless, he looks a little unnatural. But like the way he plays that character of like, hey, I was this guy, and now I've been given this chance to be this like stronger, like the sort of gravitas he brings to that role. It's not cheesy, right? Yeah. It's like you believe in that guy. Like I think that's, if you can find a character, find an actor who could, and not Charlie Hunnam or any of those guys. Like I think there's somebody out there could really pull that off. I think Shazam's going to be a good litmus test. Because of how Zachary Levi and then the kid who's playing Billy Batson, how they play off each other is going to be, I mean, they're never in the same scene together, but how they sort of thread that needle of, hey, we're the same guy, but one's got a lot of powers and one's, a little weaker. And maybe they pull like Charles Webso, who hosts the Hardy Boys drink cast. He mentioned like there's two versions of Shazam. There's the one that we know, whereas, Billy Batson says Shazam and he becomes originally Captain Marvel, but now Shazam, like, and they're the same guy, he is, Billy's mind is in this body, this big grown up body, and he just has all his powers. So it's like big. It's that. The other version of Shazam is he says Shazam, and it's almost like Etrigan. Billy Batson goes away and this like Shazam character appears, and they're two different. It's almost like he summons him from another dimension.
Right.
And Shazam is like, Billy Batson's the more mature of the two. Shazam's this like showboating kind of guy, this other character, and Billy Batson has to kind of like be the sort of grounded, centered character. So I could see He-Man going both ways. In the canon, it is more like the former, where it's, Prince Adam is still there. He just has this newer body and new powers. It would be interesting if He-Man if they played with it where he could be a different person entirely. Like when Prince Adam says that, like he goes away and like this other guy appears. I don't know. If you like He-Man and you like any of this, please give me a shout on Twitter. I'm by Taylor Trask. Please let me know what you think, because we could talk about this all day long.
So the book is called Masters of the Universe: Eternity War.
Exactly.
It is not He-Man anything. It is Masters of the Universe. Right?
It is
He-Man and the Masters of the Universe.
In this case, it is actually He-Man: the Eternity War.
Oh, okay.
But the Masters of the Universe title is it's all under the Masters of the Universe kind of series from DC, and then it's like that starts with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe Volume 1, blah, blah, and then they do a bunch of origin one shots, which are really good too. But this particular one's He-Man: the Eternity War, and I highly advise you get all 15 issues. They're broken into 2 volumes, and you will not be disappointed if you are a fan of that series.
Do you have a print or digital recommendation there?
I read every single one of these digitally.
Oh, okay. Wow.
And I think that works better because you want to it makes it feel more like it's an actual movie or cartoon, because you get like one panel at a time. And there's some surprises that I'm glad I didn't get spoiled if I was reading it physically.
Right.
If they do like an omnibus version or a director's cut version, I'll probably get the physical. But I don't think I think the colors, I think it actually serves it better digitally, because the colors, like I said, every character and every location is very lush. And it actually enhances it to have a little light behind the screen.
Oh, okay.
A little bit of extra push. So I would say go digital, at least at first.
Cool. Well, while people are going digital with that, where can they find us?
We are online. Search for Coffee and Comics with Todd and Taylor wherever podcasts are found. Tell your friends. We're on Google Play. We're on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Pocket Casts. And you can also find us online. I am by Taylor Trask on Twitter and Instagram.
And I am Hey Todd A on those places.
And please let us know, give us comments, write reviews. If you like the show, if you don't like the show, write a review, let us know. If you liked it, tell your friends to subscribe, or at least check out an episode or 2. And we'll see you guys next week.